So today on how to practice, I feel like I have to make an explanation for this music theory system that I'm gonna spend a bunch of episodes on. Now, the thing about it is this. Here's the premise, okay? Once you can play the guitar, you're getting kind of good, all right? The hardest thing about the guitar that gets in the way of just about everybody is how to find your way around the fretboard, how to know the whole fretboard, okay? So, at any rate, I know for myself, 1982, I was already making my living as a guitar player in New England. I ran into the Ted Dunbar system. He was teaching a 2-week workshop that I was able to get a full scholarship for. It was great. Ted Dunbar, legendary jazz educator and great guitar player. And he taught this system of how to divide the guitar into 5 zones and figure things out in a kind of really advanced way. Now, later on, I believe it could have been the 1990s, those 5 zones, people began to use the cage system, okay? So I'm going to talk a lot about the cage system in this because I think it works. It's not what I learned first, but same thing. Okay, at any rate, the idea is this. Okay, in music theory, all right, I'm going to start with the major scales, particularly C major. Now notice, on the keyboard, right, all the white keys, that's where we're starting. Now, these white keys, they made them easy to play. They made them in a row for a reason, because it's the major scale. We're going to start with the major scale. Well, why? Okay. So first thing, we're going to learn the major scale. We're going to learn it on 1 string. Then we're going to learn it in 5 positions all over the guitar. Okay. Great place to start. Now, as a guitar player, you might say to yourself, well, I don't play the major scale all the time. It's not my number one. Like for a lot of guitar players, the pentatonics, right, is primary. And that may or may not be true, okay? But we have to realize that the music theory system started with the major scale, and everything is measured against and based on that, okay? Well, okay, just a little bit of history, not to bore anybody, but why did this get started? So basically, my understanding of it was it started in Egypt, like 5,000 years ago. I don't know. The people that built the pyramids, they had the music theory system. Their music theory system divided the octave up into whole steps and half steps and scales into whole steps and half steps. Apparently, they probably had the system of what we call now modes, okay? The modes became incorporated in Greece, okay, but also in India, in Hindustani music, classical Indian music, same system, okay? So we inherited the Greek modes, okay, the Aeolian, the Ionian, major and minor, Dorian, Mixolydian, all of that stuff, okay? All of those scales are called diatonic, and they're based on whole steps and half steps, okay? So the major scale, right, in my video number 1, we found, I wrote it out, whole step, half step, go up a whole step, then again, whole step, half step. That's the pattern, okay? Now, what happened was the reason why we really want to start there is everything is based on the major scale, okay? It's, think about it. Let's say, somebody's talking, I got a 1-4-5 progression. Well, what does that mean? Okay, it means I got a progression that starts on 1 of what? The major scale. 4. Well, that's a chord that starts on the 4th degree of the major scale. Okay. 5. A chord that starts on the 5th degree of the major scale. Okay, so chord progressions. How do you build chords? 1, 3, 5. A triad. From what? The major scale. That's a major chord. What's a minor chord? Well, you lower the 3rd. Compared to what? You see? So that's where we start. And the reason for this is super interesting. I just looked this up again on Wikipedia. So there was a dude named Rameau, incredibly great composer, French composer. 1722, he comes out with his book called A Treatise on Harmony or something like that. And it's very like scientific and, like really super interesting book. Becomes the second best-selling book in Europe for like decades. Now, this is astounding. Think about this. Because the best-selling book was obviously the Bible. All right. So this is like the bestseller. It just means to me, more people were jamming and playing music back then. It was a household thing. Remember, there's no TV, there's no YouTube, there's no electricity, right? Okay, but anyway, so he set down in 1722 in this treatise, very popular book, all of this stuff, the stuff we use now. Basically, when you get familiar with, say, with a Nashville Number system, it's identical to what this guy Rameau wrote down there. A number of people in Nashville have commented on that. It's very interesting. So, all right, so does that mean music stopped in 1722 and nothing has happened since then? No, that's not the point. The point is, for better or for worse, we're still using that system. And actually, it's for better. The system's great. It works. It's really the same system the Greeks were doing thousands of years ago, a couple thousand years ago, whatever. Okay, at any rate, that's why. Okay, now we're going to take the major scale and we're going to first put it on one string. We're going to do it on the first string. I have a video up about that already. Then what we're going to do is we're going to put the major scale through the cage system. Okay, C, A, the A cage, the G, the E. Ooh, I hate that one. Just up and down the neck. So, for instance, when a guitar player is going like, and he knows all of this. How do you get to know the whole fretboard? Well, this is a system. Now, when I ran into this in 1982 from Ted Dunbar, I was already playing and jamming. I found this so helpful that basically I spent, I think, 3 or 4 months kind of just practicing his exercises with this. And I got to the point where I could pretty much play the same music anywhere on the guitar. That's what his system was about. It was great. Okay, so I mentioned the Nashville Number system. Okay, that's based on these numbers that we're going to do. Okay, so the idea is this. If you learn your major scale and then compared to that, you learn your other scales and your arpeggiated chords, then if you know the major scales really well, you can convert them rapidly. So for instance, if I've got a major, right, a major arpeggio, I can convert that into minor just by lowering the third once I know where it is, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to first learn the major scales. Then we're going to go back to each position, 5 zones of the guitar. And we're going to then learn the important scales and the important arpeggios, chords, okay? So the idea about it, like for instance, for me, when I do my chording on the guitar, right, I'm kind of wanting to, I want to think like a piano player, like, oh, here's my notes, and I've got a menu from the frets like that. Now, another point, why know music theory? You might say to yourself, who cares, right? Well, for one thing, music theory I think is super interesting. Okay, so that's a reason of itself. I sort of have a thing where one of the things I like about music theory, for me, in almost like a scientific way, it explains why does music sound the way it does. So if you have a certain interval, if you have a minor seventh, why does that mean? That just sounds like a minor seventh to me. You know what I mean? Because I've been through that. So why does music sound the way it does? But okay, the thing that I've noticed in my 50 plus years of playing on the music scene is, like I mean, I hate to say this, but all of the good players, they all know the music theory. Okay, and I think that's reason alone enough to consider that fact. Okay, it will make you a much better guitar player. Okay, there's no question about that. But check it out. I mean, think about it. In Nashville, they have the Nashville Number system, right? It's all music theory. Like a lot of times people say, oh, I really like the blues. I don't have to know my music theory. Well, okay, just go on YouTube and look at those instructional videos that B.B. King did. Is all he talks about is music theory. It's kind of shocking, actually. He was actually he got a correspondence degree in music theory when he was on the road. It was so important to him. He was so motivated. So I think it's kind of universal. Okay, so I love the system. I think it's super helpful once we get started on it. Within months, a player could have really a great knowledge of music theory all over the guitar fretboard. Anyway, hope this was helpful, and I hope you enjoy the system.